Greetings, greetings. As you know, I'm going to let this live fill up. As you come on this live, please share this live. Greetings, greetings, sister, greetings. How's everything going, sister? And let me share this live real quick. As y'all coming on this live, please share it. Chop it up with y'all real quick on about something real important and one of our greatest important African liberators of our lifetime. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna discuss a little bit about somebody who's not really talked about as far as, you know, African leadership, and you know, one of the greatest kings. You know, even though I don't really like to use the title kings too much, but you know, one of our great Igbo kings that's not really talked about, but he's known. I'm not gonna say he's not known, but he's known all across, you know, Igbo land and other parts of Africa, but he's not really known in the African diaspora. So that's why I really wanted to do this video, because it's important that our people across the globe, in the African diaspora particularly, know who this great man was. And this is somebody that I've been studying over the years, and just a great story, period. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, let me just say this real quick before I hop into it, is that, you know, like, you know, people always complaining about Hollywood, you feel me, and Hollywood not making movies about our great African figures, sheroes, and heroes throughout history. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like it's up to, you know, people who look like us to put out these great movies about these great heroes and sheroes. But it comes to find out that a lot of these black people, they don't want to do movies about people like this. You see what I'm saying? So, because a lot of them have the money to do movies on figures like this. You feel me? So, there's no complaint. You know, it should be no complaining about what the white man is doing to restrict, you know what I'm saying, movies being made about people that should be made about. You feel me? And this great leader right here, man, this great figure in history of time should definitely be mentioned up there with the greats. If not one of the top 5 greatest of all time. But his story just not known in the African history and African diaspora. You feel me? Especially the African diaspora. I don't really know about the educational system on the continent of Africa, but I know about the educational system in the diaspora. And this great man is not known amongst many of my people over here, amongst New Africans and Africans in the African diaspora. This is just pure facts. And I really wanted to do this video because I feel like we're heading into a new decade. So I figured that he's a great person to like use as an example on what I want to talk about as we head into a new decade. And what I'm talking about is popularizing nationalism. You feel me? Because that word, I come to find out that word nationalism kind of freaks out black people. It kind of freaks out African people. It's like you bring up nationalism to the majority of African people in the African diaspora or on the continent or wherever African people may be who's not really educated about nationalism. It seems like when that's brought up, it kind of pumps fear into a lot of African people and a lot of, you know what I'm saying, people across the world, period. Because I feel like, how can I put it? You know, due to Europeans and their propaganda and how they control history and how they control educational systems and how they try to control what's being put out to the world, I feel like that has a lot to do with it also. That, you know, when you bring up nationalism or you bring up nationhood or you bring up separatism, it's seen as this most horrific, evil thing to African black people. It's like, and Europeans paint it, and, you know, and they show it as something that African people shouldn't embrace. You feel me? And how contradictory is that? You see what I'm saying? Listen to what I'm just saying. Like, Europeans will paint nationhood, sovereignty, separatism, you know what I'm saying? Self-determination. All these great things, you feel me? They project it on African people globally, or wherever African people may be, as something that we should not embrace. What a contradiction. And why do I say this is a contradiction? This is a contradiction because when it comes to Europeans and European civilizations, nationalism and separatism is the highest development amongst their civilization. That's something that they're trying to obtain, as you see all across the world, as they take land, as they conquer land. You see what I'm saying? And create their own nations. You see what I'm saying? It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things to Europeans when they're doing it. You feel me? When they're conquering other people and taking other people's land, it's something great. Nationalism is great to white people. But when African people, new African people try to embrace nationalism, like, no, they're terrorists. They're terrorists. No, they can't embrace nationalism. No, they're terrorists. No way. No way, black people. You can't be a nationalist. You can't have your own nation. You can't embrace the politics of nationalism. You see what I'm saying? It's something that they don't want African people to embrace, because you want to know why? They want African people to be their colonial subjects. Period. You see what I'm saying? The main reason that Africans were brought to America, to the diaspora, was to be colonial subjects, laborers. You feel me? Never to obtain what Europeans are obtaining. You see what I'm saying? And the two of the biggest contradictory European nations of all time is the United States of America and Britain. The brothers. The two brother countries. You see what I'm saying? The two biggest contradictions on this face of this earth is the British and the United States of America. Period. And let me start this live off by just saying, let me give all praises and thanks to the Father, the Abba, Saladin Shakur. Free all political prisoners and prisoners of war. Free all new African political prisoners of war, and free all African political prisoners worldwide that's fighting for what I'm talking about here today, which is nationalism. 2020 is coming. You feel me? And I feel like 2020 is a major pivoted time for African people seeking true liberation. Why? Because we have too many reformists, reactionary black folks in groups, organizations who are so-called controlling the whole, how can I put it? That's controlling the whole political, social, economic realm of African people, especially in the United States of America. It's time to change that. We have to overthrow that. We have to get to the point where we have to show African people that, no, the only way you're going to get true freedom is through nationalism. Having your own land, your own nation, period. Because I feel like this part of our history and struggle is something that's not really being projected in mainstream. And we know it's not meant to be projected in the mainstream because we know European media wants to keep that type of thing suppressed. Sell out Negroes who fell for like the American dream or the European dream and who want to just fit in with Europeans also are suppressing and repressing this mission for Africans and oppressed Africans across the world to seek nationhood, nationalism. You feel me? So 2020, I feel like this has to be at the highest development of mobilizing and organizing African freedom-loving people, is that we have to start teaching our kids about nationalism and all the great nationalists that has ever came across us in this period of time in history, period. Like I told my Igbo brother earlier, and this was one of the truest sayings ever, is that history, because a lot of people don't like to talk about history. History is the clock. Trust me when I tell you, this is what John Henry Clark stated so elegantly, is that history is our time clock. You see what I'm saying? History is our time clock to free our future. Facts. You see what I'm saying? Without the history clock of our history and knowing who we are, we cannot liberate our future. Facts. So this is why I'm always expressing history. We must study our history. Without our history, we will continue to be colonial subjects and enslaved by Europeans and European imperialism and European colonialism forever. Do you want your kids to continue to be enslaved by a system that doesn't benefit them at all, which is global European imperialism? Your future generations will never be free until we free ourselves. Period. And what's the main thing that you must control in order to have true freedom? What do we have to take control of to gain true freedom, man? And it's very simple. It's very, very simple, man. Is that it all starts with resources. And that's why I'm talking about this great King JAJA today of OPOBO. I must emphasize this great man that's not being talked about, because he did what we need to do. Even though he did it for like over 18 years. It was a strong 18 years that King JAJA did the right thing and set the right example for future African people who are seeking to liberate themselves. Is when he brought into existence the settlement city-state in Igbo land, the great city of OPOBO. Period. A great example. And the greatest example of that being established is controlling the resources, people. We must control the resources, because the resources in return is what determines our lives, man, when it comes to labor, health, education, economics, legislation, and the most important thing of it all, military. Because without a military, you can't protect what you're trying to seek, because you know European imperialism is coming. It is coming to destroy what you create, and it's coming to take what you establish. Period. The same way they did this great king, JAJA of OPOBO. Facts. Period. And this king must be studied, because he's a true example of African nationalism, an African nationalist. He did it, people. And then the British assassinated the great King JAJA of OPOBO. They assassinated this great leader. Could you imagine if King JAJA was never exiled? And I'm going to get into all that in a few seconds. Imagine if King JAJA was never exiled. You feel me? He was double-crossed, traded on. You see what I'm saying? And then assassinated by the British Empire, because King JAJA of OPOBO was the most dangerous African in that time period on how he controlled the trade market in southeastern Igbo land. And he kept the British Empire in check. You see what I'm saying? He kept the British Empire from capitalizing off of Igbo land's resources. You see what I'm saying? This is what you must understand. We must control resources to establish economic infrastructures that will benefit new African people, Biafran people today, man. This is why poverty is the most deadliest thing on this planet. You see what I'm saying? Because of economic oppression. Controlling the resources, people, African people don't control the resources in their lands. You see what I'm saying? And if African people can't control the resources of the land, then Africans in the diaspora can never, ever be liberated. Facts. You see what I'm saying? Because the Europeans are controlling the resources on the continent. Imagine new Africans or Africans in the diaspora or whatever you identify with. Imagine if you had no middleman. You cut out the white man. Imagine you had no middleman and you had direct access to the resources on the continent, the oldest continent on the planet, that you have birthrights to, you have birthrights to these resources. African brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Imagine if you had access to these resources. Imagine if you had access to the land on the oldest continent on this planet, which is Africa. This is why the Biafran struggle is the most important struggle in our times in the 21st century right now. Biafran land has to be liberated. Biafran land is enriched with minerals, resources that Africans in the diaspora need to liberate themselves, to become independent African nationals, African national people, man. Period. This is why King JAJA kept the British in check, because he seen he was a very smart man. And I don't even, like, the purpose of it, I'm not even going to talk about King JAJA's millionaire status. Yes, King JAJA, along with Mansa Musa and people of those times from West Africa, yes, King JAJA was one of the richest men on earth at the time. But that's not how he lived morally. That's not how he lived principally. When he created the great city-state of OPOBO, that's not how he lived. He didn't live like a millionaire. You feel me? And let me just show you a picture of the great king right now. Let me show you a great picture of the king. That's King JAJA of OPOBO right there. You feasting your eyes on one of the greatest African nationalists in history. Look at that great man. That's not talked about at all in the African diaspora. The great King JAJA of OPOBO. Let me show y'all one more picture of him before I get into this topic. Or, breaking down his life real quick. And if you don't know who King JAJA is of OPOBO, I suggest you research the great king of OPOBO and teach him to your kids, and teach your kids about nationalism. And that's what we're striving for, self-determination, no matter where Africans be on this globe. Our goals are nationalism, nationhood, sovereignty. That is the only struggle. See, a lot of people get this shit twisted. The only struggle for any African people on this planet is for nationhood, to have your own country, your own nation and state, your own government, to govern yourself. Because the Europeans have never governed us to the point that it benefited us. The European puppets on the African continent, the black Negro sellouts like Muhammad Buhari and all these neo-colonialist African leaders on the planet has never did anything to benefit African people. No, they did it to benefit themselves and to enrich themselves. They did not put the people first, like the great King JAJA of OPOBO, who is the greatest example of how you self-govern your people and take care of your people. Period. There was never, in this man's story, and not saying that he was perfect. Let's get that clear. We're not saying King JAJA was perfect, but from what the history states and the research state is that his city-state, his nation of OPOBO was one of the closest to perfection in African history. That's a known fact. Even the Europeans stated this. That's why they wanted the city of OPOBO so bad. Is that they had to conquer OPOBO because OPOBO was enriched with the palm oil, and the oil period of that time period. You see what I'm saying? So they had to conquer OPOBO. When they conquered OPOBO, they knew they had Africa. Period. They knew they had Africa. I'm just trying to find this one more picture, y'all, before I get into it, because I want to show y'all the great OPOBO, the great king of OPOBO. This picture ain't clear enough, but I want to show y'all this picture. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. King JAJA with the Igbo red cap. King JAJA. This is like one of my favorite pictures of him that was painted in the art. Look at that great Igbo. Look at that great Igbo nationalist, man. Look at that great Biafran nationalist right there, man. Of OPOBO. One of the greatest nationalists in history. You looking at him right here, man. And what makes him the greatest nationalist of that time period is the fact that he put up, and this is the key thing you got to understand, what makes a great leader and a great nationalist leader is the fact, stiff resistance against European imperialism and European colonialism. You feel me? This is what makes King JAJA is someone we must study, somebody we must continue to venerate in history, and especially in the African diaspora. All my brothers and sisters in the African diaspora in the United States of America, I'm going to need you to write that name down and research this great ancestor. This is an ancestor that you should be calling in prayer. When you venerating your great ancestors in history, we must venerate King JAJA because he put up stiff resistance against the British Empire. And he taught, this is the greatest lesson that King JAJA has taught African people throughout history, is to control your resources. Never let the white man control your land and resources. And he also showed you to keep the white man out of your inner lands, the hinterlands. Keep him away from your resources. Make him play by your chess game, not the other way around. Make him play from your chess game. No, you will pay my people what we are worth for our resources, not the other way around. You can't come in our land and control our resources. That is the biggest lesson King JAJA displayed so elegantly when he fought against European imperialism. Now, to make my point on King JAJA that he wasn't perfect, yes, at times you have to compromise. Sometimes you got to compromise, even though compromising throughout history is very deferential to African liberation and African freedom. It can cost you your African freedom. It can cost you your land. It can cost you your life. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm stating for the record here. Is that yes, he did compromise on certain issues, but the one issue he didn't compromise is on in history is that no, you can't come into the hinterland. You can't come in the heart of Igbo land and do business. You see what I'm saying? This is why the British had to assassinate him. You can't come in central Igbo land and control these resources that my people are laboring for, that my people that needs for survival as a nation of people. No, you cannot come control this. It's what King JAJA said. Mm-hmm. No, you can't control these resources. He was ahead of his time. King JAJA was ahead of his time, man. He outsmarted the British Empire. And when King JAJA told them European Brits that no, you can't come in this in this land, and even when they did try to come in the land with force, he still was taxing them off of the resources of the land. Like, he did not waver at all when it came to controlling those resources. Because King JAJA understood that economic, political power is the only power to survive, for self-preservation of his people and his nation. And like I said, people, if y'all don't know anything about the city of OPOBO, is one of the most sacred cities in Igbo land. You know, I don't want to say Nigeria because we're not going to give Nigeria this platform, because Nigeria is not, let me say this again, Nigeria is not a reflection of King JAJA. Nigeria is not an example of Igbo land. You hear me? Nigeria is not even an example of humanity, of a civilized humanity, a civilized government. That's not what Nigeria is. It's not that. Nigeria is a reactionary, neo-colonialist, oppressive government. That doesn't reflect the city of OPOBO or any city in southeastern Igbo land, Biafran land, excuse me. Let's put it in proper text. You feel me? Nigeria is on the opposite side of what King JAJA in a great city-state of OPOBO stood for. Pure facts. You see what I'm saying? Because if King JAJA would have never been assassinated, it probably would have never got to the point of forcing Igbo people and forcing other ethnic groups to become part of a nation they refuse to be a part of. This is the thing people don't understand, is that it's your human right to not want to be a part of something that you know that's not good or beneficial to your people and nation. You see what I'm saying? That is a human right. And this is something that African Americans, misnomered African Americans, new Africans need to understand, that it's okay to not want to be a part of the fuckery of the United States of America or the oppressive nature of the United States of America. It's okay. It's nothing devilish about it. It's nothing evil about it. It's humane, in fact. It's humane, in fact, for self-preservation, to want to be not a part of something that's oppressive, something that's ugly in the world, something that doesn't benefit freeing oppressed people. It's okay. You're not a terrorist. You're not evil. No, you're a nationalist. You're a national of people who want to bring into existence the proper society. You see what I'm saying? A proper society. A society that reflects your national identity, people. That's what you want to fight for. That's what you want to struggle for. Like King JAJA. Is to bring in existence a society that loves all freedom-loving people and will deliver that in the manner that it's supposed to be delivered in. A government that takes care of their people. A government that respects their people. A government that doesn't want to see their people living in poverty. You see what I'm saying? This is the struggle of revolution. The revolutionary struggle is for to bring into existence societies on this earth that all people can be free in. All people. You feel me? This is what revolution is about. Changing societies, people. Scientifically. Changing societies to bring in new societies. That is beneficial to the people, the indigenous people of these lands, which is African people. African people are indigenous people. We are indigenous by birthright. We are indigenous by our African ancestry in the African continent. We are the indigenous people of the world. African people. Don't ever get that confused, black people. Black people, when you hear people say indigenous, you are indigenous. You see what I'm saying? Even the Native Indians, the Native Americans in North America, they know that you're indigenous. Black people are indigenous to every lands on this planet. But specifically the African continent, the oldest continent on this planet. Of human life, human development, human societies, human civilization. You feel me? We're indigenous peoples. And this is why the indigenous peoples of Biafra is fighting for the global African family. And we must support them. And the indigenous peoples of Biafra must support every other African independence movement on this planet that's seeking independence, nationhood, and sovereignty, because your great leader, your great ancestor, our great ancestor, King JAJA of OPOBO, did that. That is what he stood for. You see what I'm saying? We must fight as an African global family to free each other by controlling the resources. This is what they don't tell you, is that the resources is what the fight is for, man. We have to create economic infrastructures across the world for African people. And the only way that can happen, there must be a free nation on the African continent who's willing to stand up against European imperialism. You feel me? Which African nation is willing to do that and willing to help take care of the African diaspora? Which nation is willing to do that? What nation is standing up to the forefront now to do that? That's Biafra. Right now. That's Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia. And there's too many other nations to name. Republic of New Africa. Because a lot of people try to leave the Republic of New Africa out, but we're in the United States fighting, baby. We're going to continue to fight. You feel me? Whether it's to go back to Africa, you feel me? Or to bring our own Africa into existence on this continent of North America. It can be done. You see what I'm saying? And this is the thing y'all got to understand. There are native indigenous nations on the American continent who backs the Republic of New Africa for nationhood 100%. This is facts. We have documents to prove that. So don't act like a nation cannot come into existence on this land. We even had the great General Ojukwu state that eloquently in one of his speeches and his historic essays from Biafra land. General Ojukwu said that if Biafra land doesn't come into existence in the Eastern Hemisphere, there would be a Western Biafran that would come into existence in the Western Hemisphere. Who was he talking about? He was talking about the new Africans, misnomer African Americans, if they knew their true potential of being a nation of people, that they could struggle and fight to liberate themselves to create a nation state in the Western Hemisphere. But Haiti did that. Haiti brought into existence the first African nation in the Western Hemisphere. So you say it cannot be, you cannot say that it cannot be done. Haiti proved that by defeating the France Empire, and defeating Napoleon to bring into existence a new African nation. That could have been the new African nation. Well, that was before General Ojukwu's time, but that's an example. You see what I'm saying? Because General Ojukwu stated it, 1968, 1969, I do believe. And if you haven't seen that blog, go to my website, newafrican77.wordpress.com. Look up General Ojukwu in the search engine as he's, and you will see the document where he stated that there's a new African nation in the Western Hemisphere that would come into existence in that time period of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. How did this great man know that also? Long live the great General Ojukwu. You know what I'm saying? General Ojukwu, King JAJA, and now you have Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. I mean, hey, brother. I mean, what more can you say? You don't need no more better example as African nationalists than those three great brothers. You feel me? I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? You have to get control of the resources, man. Share this video with everybody, y'all. Let's get into King JAJA's life real quick, man. Let's get into his life real quick. King JAJA was born in 1821 in Igbo land in southeastern Nigeria. For those who want to know where exactly King JAJA was from. This is something you also have to learn that makes King JAJA so significant and great as an African nationalist and a great African hero in our history of African freedom fighters is the fact that King JAJA was captured. See, there's a lot of misconceptions of his story. There's the revisionist, colonial, European history on King JAJA, which I'm not even really going to get into that because that's a bunch of lies and gibberish, so I'm not even going to get into that. The facts is, at 12 years old, King JAJA was captured by his father's enemies and sold into slavery at the age of 12. So here we go with another story of another great African ancestor who was captured by his enemies, sold into slavery, and a lot of Africans, Americans, and new Africans across the world can identify with this, is that here's a story of another African being captured on the continent and sold to his enemies. JAJA was captured and sold to his enemies at the age of 12 years old. So here's a real true story of coming from the bottom and rising to the top. He literally came from nothing. Like all African freedom fighters, they come from the bottom of the bottom, the lowest of the low, in which we call the proletariat, the lumpen proletariat, or the lumpen, meaning the low of the low. You see what I'm saying? Of conditions, scientific conditions that they deem that no man can come from, or no woman can come from, or rise up out of. That's what slavery represents. Slavery is the lowest of the low in class struggle, class warfare, people. Slavery is the bottom. It's the lowest of the low. So for you to come from that, that makes you a great man, a great woman to rise out of those social conditions and not to become of your conditions. Because this is the thing you understand about a lot of African leaders, man. A lot of African leaders, or black leaders, period, they will come from the struggle, right? They will come from the most horrific conditions in history. But a lot of them don't develop that morally principled mind to understand that it's not about the riches. It's not about living lavish. It's about taking care of your people and liberating your people out of the most inhumane, impoverished conditions. That's a rare African mind, man, these days. In the history period, or in human history period, for a person to come out those type of conditions, to look back at his people and like, look here, I gotta liberate my people out of poverty. Cause see, and the thing that a lot of these African leaders do is that they forget about where they come from. They forget about where they come from. So when they get to the ladder, once they get up on the highest ladder of classism, they look back at their people as not their own people. They look down on their people. So it's rare for a person to come from those inhumane conditions of being a slave and being impoverished to finally get to that level where, you know what I'm saying, he can liberate his mind out of poverty. To look back and look like, yo, I gotta help my people, man. I gotta free my people. I gotta bring in the best society that benefits my people. I have to do that. That's a moral principle obligation. That is rare. That is rare. You feel me? In these times. So I'm just setting up that narrative to show you, like, this is what King JAJA came from. He came from slavery to create an independent state in Igbo land, man. to inspire any African, no matter where you live on the planet, is that this man went from a slave to one of the greatest African nationalists to ever live, man. And created his own independent city-state when it wasn't cool to do so. You feel me? So, this is what happened. He was sold into slavery. And this is something I got to understand, is that in Igbo land, and this is the best way I can explain it, in Igbo land, in those time periods of the 1880s and the 1800s, but I'm going to just set it up from like the 1820s to the 1880s and beyond, is that they had what they had in Igbo land is what they call houses and royal houses. And what houses and royal houses were simply houses that were trading centers. They were trading places. You feel me? Where most of the trade was conducted, and where most of the labor and the work was conducted was under the houses, royal houses of certain chiefs in Igbo land in this time period. So you can get an understanding what they mean by houses. Houses are just trading centers and trading places controlled by those chiefs of those specific royal houses. So when he was sold into slavery, he was later sold to a chief by the name of Chief Al-Ala'i in OPOBO, the Annie-Pemple Royal House. You have to understand that. Because the Annie-Pemple Royal House was the royal houses in the city kingdom of Bani. There's a city and kingdom of that time period called Bani. Bani was the what you would call how can I put it? Bani was the central kingdom of that time period when JAJA was a kid and as he grew as an adult. Bani was the trading land of that time period in southeastern Igbo land. Bani. So at an early age, King JAJA extinguished and developed great entrepreneurial skills as he worked as a slave. Something that you have to understand. That even though you're in slavery, you gotta always understand that your mind is not enslaved. So think about it. And then we gotta look at it from this point of view also, is that you have to understand this social dynamic, is that African slavery, a lot of people are totally diseducated about African slavery. African slavery was not the European Arab slavery that you have come to know throughout history. Not letting off the hook, not saying all African royal, you know what I'm saying, people that had slaves treated their slaves that great.